Hi, you're all very welcome back, folks, to the Celtic Soul Podcast as we hit episode number 53. Today we'll have the second part of my interview with Paul McQuade. Paul, of course, is the editor of the Shamrock Fanzine. If you tuned into episode 52, you will agree with me that he's done so much within, I suppose, Celtic fandom with his books, and he's currently researching and writing a book on Johnny Doyle. He's also one of the founding members of the Celtic Graves Association and the man behind the Walfrid Walking Tours, which he brought us on virtually in part one of the interview. So stay tuned, folks, because a great conversation coming up with Paul. Folks, we're looking for some sponsorship. We've none for this episode, so if you're a Celtic-minded business or a Celtic supporters club or a rich Celtic fan and you'd like to throw us a couple of quid towards the sponsorship, towards the production of the podcast, please get in contact with us through the website, messages on social media, or you can contact us at info@celticfanzine.com. And if you're a listener or a reader and you would like to support our independent Celtic fan platform, you can do so by becoming a member, subscribing, buying, donating for the price of a pint. Membership starts at $7.99, subscriptions $5.99. I think our online shop, we kick off with the digital fanzine at $2.50, merchandise from a $5, and keep an eye out because we're having a sale at the moment. So visit us again, CelticFanzine.com. Your support helps us to continue to produce quality fan journalism, fanzines, the podcast. We're going to start doing a bit of video content again, and once again, fan events when we can get back to doing them. So, folks, keep all the comments coming in and suggestions for guests you'd like us to have on the show, and we will contact them and we'll try and dig into their Celtic souls. Here's a few of the comments from the last episode. Finally up to date with these podcasts. Great listen for all Celtic fans. Fair play to the big man, Andrew Milne. I was 20 episodes behind, but I caught up out walking during the current lockdown. And that comes from John Mooney from the Rue Glen Hotel in Kilkenny. Fair play to you, John, and thanks for your sponsorship. You sponsored a couple of podcasts, and we look forward to you sponsoring another one when the hotel opens up again. Rowan's laughing here at me. And John is in Kilkenny, and he corrected me on that the Kennedys are from Wexford and not Waterford, because his hotel's in Kilkenny. I was drinking in Waterford and the Kennedys are in Wexford, and I think I've got round the whole place in about half an hour. So just goes to show how close John is to all these counties. He must be doing some business down in that hotel. A chat all about things Celtic with Ireland's best homegrown product since Brendan Shine and Mrs. Doyle. And that comes in from our guest, Paul McQuade, about my good self. Thanks very much, Paul. I've never been compared to either before, but I've been called worse, so as I said, thank you. This will be a great listen. Can you ask Mr. McQuade how old he is in this picture? And I think that comes in from your mate, Paul Owen. I think he's taking the piss out of you now. Another fantastic pod, and looking forward to part two. And that again came in from Owen. Hi, Andrew. I've been listening to your podcast for a while now, and I'm really enjoying them. Love the variety of guests you have on, and it's helped me get through the lockdown when I can't be bothered getting out for a walk or a run. I get the podcast on and away I go. We met briefly in Paris just before the PSG game when we came close to beating them. Well, we did indeed. We came close to beating them for a couple of minutes and then they hammered us. And that comes in from Neil Patterson. Neil also planted a seed in my head for a podcast there. So more on that in the coming weeks. And thank you, Neil, for sending me on the story about the All Blacks, and probably get round to talking about that on one of the podcasts. We've also been busy putting out articles on the website this week, and Liam Kelly's article entitled The Tunbridge Woman Who Owns Celtic has got a lot of traffic and a lot of interest. It's about Tom McColgan and where his shares went. And one reader who contacted us was former Celtic director Tom Grant, who was on the old board before the takeover. He did back Ferguson McCann eventually. His shares were handed down to him from his dad, who in turn came down the McColgan chain. I'm going to speak to Tom, and hopefully he might come on the podcast and we can get an insight into the old board before the takeover, because we've had Matt McGlone on from Celts for Change, and we've had David Lowe on who worked alongside Fergus during the takeover. So it'll be interesting to get Tom's take. Now, he hasn't agreed to come on the podcast, but I am chasing him up on that one, and we are emailing each other. I'm told he's a good Celt as well, so looking forward to hopefully getting him on the pod. And we also got a lovely message from Sean Fernie, grandson of the legendary Willie Fernie, after we published an article by David Potter on his grandfather. So, folks, keep all the stuff coming in, keep the comments coming in, and as I said, the suggestions for guests. And don't forget to check out CelticFanzine.com for daily news and articles and opinion on the current team, and there's some great historical articles there to read and loads of timeless articles posted in the library. So something for you to do on a rainy day or a lockdown Sunday. Here we are in the month of February, and I have to say it's been a lot kinder to us on the pitch. Well, so far anyway. Neil Lennon has settled on a team. The only arrival in the transfer window was John Joe Kenny, and he seems to have settled into the right back position. He's a regular now in the starting 11, played in the 3 games since he came in. We've conceded 1 goal and scored 10, so I know the 10's gone, but we need to be positive about these results and performances. Even if on Wednesday night we had to kind of wait an hour for the game to really kick off, but when it did, we got 3 goals in 5 minutes, 4-0 win, so we have to be happy with that. Now, El Hamid has joined Frimpong and Hisham in exiting the Celtic Park building. He arrived in the summer of 2019 and made his debut in the 7-0 win over St Johnstone, and he leaves with a treble of medals. League Cup, League and Scottish Cup medals in his back pocket. He struggled to adjust to life during COVID and he was missing his family. No matter how much money you have and no matter what your lifestyle is, it must be a pain in the ass to be just sitting around on your own after training and waiting for the game. And he wasn't in the team. Frimpong was playing ahead of him, so I suppose it's probably a good bit of business for him and the club. It's early days with this defence, but 10 goals and 1 against is a great start to the month. And hopefully the injury to Stephen Welch he picked up on Wednesday night is not going to keep him sidelined too long. And like Kenny, he's played the last 3 games alongside Ayer and Taylor, and consistency seems to be the key here. The Green Brigade seem to know how to get the headlines in Scotland in the media. They once again unfurled a banner on Wednesday morning outside Celtic Park this time, and again it split the Celtic support on Twitter and social media. On the pitch, it was a comfortable win after Tom Rodgers' goal settled us down, and I did say earlier there that 60 minutes, kind of pre-season friendly really, and then once Eddie slotted the penalty, Christie Turnbull, impressive result. Yeti continued up front after not getting a 2-match ban for being cited for diving, and the gap is now, I don't really want to say it, but it's 18 points, but we have a game in hand. St Johnstone are next on Sunday at lunchtime, and let's hope Chris Boyd is missing again from the Sky Sports lineup. He has to be the worst pundit around, and he does me head in, I have to say. So hopefully we get another win and another clean sheet on Sunday. And my guest again this week on the podcast is Paul McQuade, as we have the second part of our conversation. Paul is editor of the Shamrock Fanzine. He's also the man behind the Walking Walfrid Tour, one of the founding members of the Celtic Graves Association. I have to get that in because there is a group of them. And he's also written 3 books on Celtic. Said Lizzy to Philip, How Celtic Gatecrashed the Coronation. This is How It Feels to be Celtic, an account of the Invincible season. And he is currently writing a biography on Johnny Doyle. The portfolio was so big as a Celtic supporter. Paul, 3 books, but one which interests me is This Is How It Feels to be Celtic, because I was there. What an amazing season. What an amazing time. The last 9 years. Yeah. I think we're starting to lose sight of what we've done in the last 9 years because of how emotionally we are involved with the 10. We've just done a quadruple treble, and sometimes it doesn't even get spoken about when you're in conversation. The topic of conversation is Neil Lennon and Peter Lowell, and maybe Dermot Desmond. But there is so much more to talk about. But that season in particular, the Invincible season, it was just, it was brilliant. And Bailey, unbelievable. Scott Sinclair, these new players that came in, and there was so many highs, and it was a season where I can't recount the miles because you wanted to be at every game. We were home and away. We're back in Europe. We took a few hammerings, mind you. Yeah. We hammered the Huns. But it's only when you read a book like this, and it's so recent, that the memories start flowing back to you. Because I'm sure if someone says to me, it'll bring back another memory. The one that sticks out for me of that season was definitely the 5-1. The Tom Rodgers goal, because everyone keeps banging on about it. When that hit the back of the net. As you said, winning the whole time in Hampden, because I've had so much disappointment in that stadium. But what are your, relight my fire with that season again? Give me some of your highlights.
As the season was progressing, I thought, I really want to try and record some of this, because it's felt like the best example, and certainly subsequent years I think have demonstrated this, the best example of unity between the fans, the club and the players, the management as well. Because not only did we have a fantastic team who not were the only winning regularly, they were playing some superb football, but they were pulling off some great results. One of the ones that sticks out for me is that game at Fir Park, which I was lucky enough to be at when we won 4-3 And it was like two boxers going at it, and we kept coming back. And the scenes when the final whistle went were just sensational, because you're thinking, we're going to keep this run going. This could actually happen. We could keep going and not getting beat this season. And that's before you even get to the semi-finals and the cup finals and what have you. But for me, it was the fact that in the stadium, the standing section, had just been created, right? And nobody really knew how that was going to play out, I was certainly hopeful because I can't think of a better place for it to take root, and it's something that the new stadium had been missing a little bit, especially when less successful periods, there wasn't a lot of noise being generated. So effectively the Green Brigade moved down the wee part of the ground, and then people were able to move into that area as well. And then we've got this, not just standing and singing, but we've got banners and displays, the like of which we've never really seen before. So that to me becomes the new beaten corner, the beaten side of Celtic Park, and the whole stadium, the whole support responded to that magnificently. And through that, we then had songs about players, the likes we'd never created before, or certainly not for years. Individual supporters clubs were creating their own songs on away trips up to Inverness and Dingwall, and they were taking root amongst the whole support, the Brendan Rodgers songs, the Kieran Tierney songs, Scott Sinclair song, the Stuart Armstrong song is just absolutely incredible, for those of us who grew up in the 80s, all these kind of electronica songs from our youth now being put to Celtic words and Celtic music. So this combination of the support having the time of our lives, fantastic team, inspirational manager as well, brilliant coach, which I think we're all now slowly beginning to acknowledge again, because much like with Kieran Tierney, Brendan Rodgers' reputation is going through something of rehabilitation at the moment as well. And it just turned into this season that snowballed into a season like no other. So once the season was finished, I thought about it, and it's going to take too long. Then I had a chat with my wife, and I tried to get her to persuade me, you should do it because you'll probably never have another season quite like it, which will probably be the case. You say that, the Rodgick moment in the rain, not his best goal, but doesn't matter, that's probably the closest I've ever came to crying and with joy watching Celtic at that moment, because I knew that if we won that game, I would have a season that none of my ancestors had experienced, that this was going to be my defining moment as a Celtic fan. And I think that's why it sticks in so many people's minds as well, because we did it, Invincible season and a treble, incredible. And just as you were saying there, Andrew, doing 4 trebles in a row, it will take years for Celtic fans to properly appreciate what the team achieved and what we experienced. And these things often do, because for me growing up, never did the treble until I was in my 30s. Martin O'Neill, 2001. Rangers had done it a couple of times when I was young, and then they did it a couple of times during their 9 in a row. So you're thinking, this is something you'd really like to enjoy, So we did it under Martin. That was amazing. And then that season with Brendan Rodgers and those players was amazing. But to keep doing it, competition after competition, going back to Hampden, beating everything that was put in front of us, year after year after year after year, absolutely incredible. And you're right, we don't appreciate it, but I think we will come to appreciate it even more the wee distance in time as well.
And I think some of the younger fans will as well, because they kind of give me a bit of stick for they call me a Celtic da. But, as I say back to them, but you'll be a Celtic da one day too, and you will look back at this, because this may never happen again. In the Invincible season, treble, 2 trebles, 3 trebles, 4 trebles. Unbelievable. Now, when Brendan Rodgers came to Celtic, while we're on Brendan, he was looking for love. He'd fell out of love with Liverpool. He'd almost won the league with Liverpool. So I think he'd proved to Swansea that he had pedigree. And then at Liverpool, he almost won the league. I forget the name of the player that fell on his ass to let him down. But anyway, I wonder whatever happened to him. I don't think he ever recovered from it, In fact, his name, I think, no, I can't remember his name. Anyway,
Slipped from memory.
Yeah, he slipped as well, didn't he? But he let his whole team down, and he let, he, no matter what he ever achieves the rest of his life, he let his team down that day. He let his city down. He let his mates down. He let everyone down. That man is not to be trusted. But anyway, I forget his name anyway, but I don't trust him anyway. But Brendan came in, right? He needed love, and he found love. We fell in love with him. As you say, the singing section, the song, Depeche Mode, we just can't get enough. And we couldn't. He couldn't get enough of us. We couldn't get enough of him. Brendan Rodgers here for 10 in a row. I always knew, and I always felt he was so ambitious. And if he wasn't going to get success in Europe, he was going to eventually move. I didn't expect him to be here for 10. I didn't expect him to go the way he went. But I knew he was ambitious, and I knew that we should be more ambitious. I thought we should be more ambitious. I don't think it's acceptable, just to be better than Rangers or better than debt Rangers or Sevco or whatever they're called now. As I said, I did believe he would leave. I did think there was rumours about the transfer window, that player that went to Valencia. There was a few signals that everything wasn't well within the camp. We're hearing his relationship when he left, people that were close to Brendan or maybe close to people who were close to him were saying, and people I trust, all the people that don't normally come out with bullshit, but they were saying, look, there's a lot more to this. So then you're hearing that Brendan's relationship with Peter was very much strained after that deal not getting over the line. There was private jets involved in that and contracts agreed, and 2 days later it still wasn't over the line. And this is what we're hearing, but we probably won't ever hear the truth until either Peter Lawler writes a book or Brendan Rodgers writes a book. It just didn't fit, And when Brendan left during the night, he became the villain, the pantomime villain. But then, I don't agree with the way he was called a rat or a snake. It suited the club for him to be made the villain, because at the end of the day, he was going to leave eventually. He was leaving steady foundations there. The club was back up. We were back up in the high hour. We were winning trebles. But one thing that sticks out with me is the amount of money the club made by him leaving. So as a PLC, it was a brilliant business deal. When I mentioned Brendan Rodgers to some people, and people have, I wouldn't say I've nearly come to blows with people in airports, but it has got quite heated, because it was just a one-sided thing. And I said, look, there's two sides to every story. They were saying, Brendan's a rat. Brendan left us. We loved him, and he left us. And I think it was Heskey summed it up on Facebook. Paul Heskey from Belfast summed it up the best. He said it was like the love of your life, your wife leaving you. And then and it did feel, and it was quite emotional as well when he went. But what's your thoughts on it? Was he the villain? Was he the rat? Or was Peter Lawwell?
I'll never forget the reaction of the Celtic support to Rodgers leaving. It was just incredible. And as you were saying there, it was almost like, this generation of guys, age 30, 40, 50, whatever, it was as if they were involved in the first teenage heartbreak. The reaction from individuals, some of them I know, was just disgraceful, But we were so upset because it happened so quickly and it was a betrayal. And he left the team in the lurch. And some of the things that I said there still hold true, Can you imagine if he'd persuaded John Kennedy and the goalkeeping coach to go as well? We would have been left with nobody for that Hearts game, So it's like any kind of classic love affair, isn't it? We were head over heels because in the manager stakes, he was a superstar. He did have an affinity with the club, but there was always these wee doubts. So my friend Jim, for example, always said to me, there was a podcast that I think St. Anthony, Stevie Murray, did with Tommy Burns' wife, great interview, really enjoyed it, some great stories that Rosemary had, including back in when we won the Cup in 85. It was such good news for the wives because it meant that Celtic players would get a bonus and that the Burns family were able to go on holiday abroad that year. Just like completely different stratosphere, in terms of money in football. Just that one story helped illustrate. But Stephen did ask Rosemary Burns about Brendan Rodgers, because of the time spent down in Reading. And, Brendan had said he'd worked under Tommy. And what my friend Jim pointed out was Rosemary Burns knows him, but she doesn't seem to know much about him. It's not as if he's had a great impact on her, Whereas the way that Brendan Rodgers had been telling the story was that he'd got quite close to Tommy Wren. Now, I was battering what Jim was saying to me, but there was other things that came up that year, including the Danny McGrain story, right? And I'm still thinking, nah, this has been blown up. But there's a definite character defect in Brendan Rodgers' personality. He definitely exaggerates certain things. It's probably related to his ego as well. So when I was doing that book, I did more research into his career, his background. Fortunately, one of my pals I know from Cushion Doll, one of his pals, went to school with Brendan, used to play football with him as well. So I was getting a wee bit of information of what he was like back then. And definitely a Celtic fan, definitely had been to Celtic Park. But I think what we had here was a guy who had a connection with Celtic, but when he came here, he knew exactly what to say to the support to get them on. He's talking about being in Baird's Bar, coming over for the games, and we as a support lapped it up, and we lapped up the success as well. But as you said, Andrew, this is a very driven guy. He's got a career, and that career was never going to be spent in Glasgow. And unfortunately, 10 in a row. And this is the kind of same thing happened with Kieran Tierney as well, The reaction of the support there was very bitter, because some people thought Kieran Tierney could never leave. Well, we were trying to go for 9 and then 10 in a row, but he did leave, and that broke hearts as well. And the reaction to that was really over the top from a lot of people as well now, And as I said, both those individuals' reputations starting to be rehabilitated among the Celtic support. For me, I always liked both of them, and I ended up writing extensively about both of them in that book because they were two of the cornerstones to that Invincible season, and they came in for a lot of stick that they didn't deserve. But I think, for a lot of support, we had our minds closed. And I was guilty of that. My pal Jim was saying to me, there's some warning signs here. This guy isn't the Celtic support he's making himself out to be. There's lots of inconsistencies. But I was shutting my mind off because I was besotted by the fact that he was getting so much out of that team. And I loved the fact that as a coach, he was constantly there, constantly on the sideline, talking to guys. As soon as halftime came, as soon as the final whistle, he's on the pitch, he's in their ear, he's saying to them, you should have done this, and coaching right from the word go. And what we understand, although we never really as fans get the proper insight, it looks as though he introduced a professionalism into Lennoxtown, into the whole structure that perhaps hadn't been there before, been there for a few years, and we benefited from that as well. But when he left, a lot of that left with him, unfortunately. Neil Lennon, to his eternal credit, came in, picked up the pieces from that, and took us on to more glory, and deserves credit for that, for winning the league, getting us over the line, for winning the cup. And when something you said earlier reminded me, Andrew, when some of my pals were saying to me after we lost the Rangers game back in September at home, Lennon's finished, we need to get somebody else in. What I was saying at that time was, no, this guy turned it around in January. We were in a dark place last January after they beat us. And, and finally, after what happened in the League Cup final, although we won it, you could tell this is a team that's closing the gap on us, But Neil Lennon did enough with the team to get us back on track in 2020 and then build up a significant lead, although interestingly, they collapsed as well. But it was always going to be difficult clinching that for 10 in a row, given that they were strengthening again, And he's a different kind of manager. I don't think we're going to get a manager like Brendan Rodgers for a long time.
Yeah, it's interesting to get your take on, especially because you're researching for the book. On Kieran, and I think this may go kind of unnoticed sometimes. I loved Kieran. I just thought he was, he loved Celtic, and he got so much stick. I remember writing a piece when he left, Kieran Tierney is still one of us, and I got pelters for it, because it's maybe because I'm a little older and I have a son, around Kieran's age. Kieran played an awful lot of football from Ronnie Delia, took him in. Yeah. He played through the pain barriers. He when he went to Arsenal, they done it right. They went, look, get yourself fixed up, and we still see it. But I would imagine if he was my son, and what an honour it would be to have your son playing for Celtic. And I know his dad, it's well documented. His dad had said he would go. He was the future, Yeah. But if you've got if you're a player and you've got an injury, and you've played an awful lot of football, and we don't know how bad these injuries are or what painkillers they take or injections they take into the game, especially with a young player. If he gets the opportunity to make life-changing money, and Celtic would have pushed that deal as well, of that I have no doubt.
Oh, absolutely.
And they would have known his injuries, If they get an opportunity, it's one that very few people would pass up. And at the end of the day, as fans, we're so emotionally involved in Celtic, but as players come and go. Even if they love Celtic, they come and go. Managers come and go. The board, although they've been there a long time, they come and go. But the fans stay, and I think, we think everybody should stay with us that's successful. But they have their own agenda, and I wouldn't have a bad word said by Kieran Tierney. He's a young kid. That money, the only thing I will say is it's definitely distracting the other Scottish players, because someone said, I don't know if it was David Potter or David Lowe, somebody said recently on the podcast that he's coming up. They know the money he's on, and the heads have been turned. The Christies and the McGregors and all these players are thinking, oh, I could do that. Wow, imagine having that money, because when is enough money enough? The days of the Tommy Bones and the Paul McQuade are long gone.
But people say that, but if you read Tommy Burns' autobiography, Tommy almost left Celtic, I think, on 2 occasions because they weren't giving him decent money. So, of course, I'm reminded of the story that Rosemary Burns said in the podcast, that was it. They had to win the cup to get the bonus to pay for a family holiday abroad. And he'd been in the Celtic first team for about 8 or 9 years by then. So Tommy had to fight hard to get the money that he thought he was worth from the Celtic board. But you're right. Players have always got their heads turned, especially for the lure of England. That was a problem that Celtic founding fathers had in the early days. Some of the escapades they got up to try to get players to come back. But Johnny Doyle, when he got his international call-up, he told a story about how he would be playing cards with your guys like Lou Macari, Billy Bremner, and he was amazed because these players who were based in England were betting money, which was 2 and 3 months Johnny Doyle's salary a year. He was part-time here, and he had a job at British Steel. But it was like 2 or 3 months' wages that these guys were gambling because of the amount of money that they were on in England. So that lure has always been there, And obviously, Kieran Tierney, it's what I saw. I'd followed what some people were saying close to the family in some of the forums. If you follow it for long enough, you can detect whether what they're saying is more likely to be accurate or not, And from what I was reading between the lines, people were saying Kieran almost went before the Arsenal deal, and it was Celtic who'd been pushing it, but he was happy to stay at that time. But by the time it came about again the next year when Arsenal were interested, you're right, it was almost seemed to be a done deal. Celtic were pushing it really hard. For that family, that money meant the whole family are set up for the rest of their lives, not just Kieran Tierney. And I think that's something that we supporters often overlook, because he was a guy who'd been injured quite badly. In fact, that Motherwell game I mentioned earlier in the Invincible season, that game, Andrew, it was at half-time, a lot of people shouting, and where I was in the bottom tier, because Kieran was up in the top tier. His leg was in a cast. But where he lives is just at the back of Fir Park, just up the road from Fir Park. And when I was leaving, a lot of fans in the stadium taking their time because they were all waiting to get their autograph from Kieran, who was hobbling down the stairs on the way out. And for me, I'd seen the stories, I'd seen pictures of him at games before. I saw him when he was injured at Hamilton as well, but to see a Celtic player in amongst the support like that, it was quite surprising and quite heartwarming. But you've always got to be alive to the fact this is a guy who had a lot of injuries, and there was a definite question mark over his fitness going forward as well. And Celtic got fantastic money for him. But you're right, he gets criticised because he was, waving the Green Brigade with the megaphone and the boys' flags as well. And people say, no, he should never have done that. But he did that because he's a supporter. Those groups wouldn't have let an imposter do that, you know what I mean? Because again, I understand you could links with both guys in both groups as well. So it was because it meant something to him that he got to do it, Rangers on their side, they've only got your man Andy, what's his name, to do it, you know what I mean? And that doesn't mean anything, it would appear. So all football supporters are looking to get that connection with a particular guy, and we had it with Kieran. And I'm not aggrieved, about the fact he left to go to England, and I'm pretty confident we'll hopefully see him back at Celtic Park sometime in the future.
Well, we definitely see him back as a fan anyway, whether he comes back as a player. But that's a very interesting point that, that he sets his whole family up for life, and that is a nice story, and it does get overlooked. Like if any of my family are out there and are listening and they would like to get a big move to a job, I would definitely be like, and that goes out to my family in America, any rich relatives over there. There's always room in my credit union for a few quid. But right, we spoke about pantomime villains when we mentioned Kieran and Brendan, and another pantomime villain is Peter. Now Peter Lowell is going to leave Celtic with a very impressive CV, no matter what anyone says. After 17 years, which is a long time to be a CEO of any company, we are a PLC, even though we're a football club. We look at ourselves as fans, but the company looks at us as customers. But he leaves after 17 years, and he's won 29 trophies. Or Celtic have won 29 trophies during his time there now, which is a great legacy. But like Neil Lennon, did he just hang on too long?
Well, I mean, let's be honest, in his position, nobody was going to leave before this season, because if Celtic had gone on and done 10 in a row, then that would have been the high watermark to leave on. So I certainly don't blame him for staying on and hoping to achieve that. I just wish things were being handled a bit differently now. As I said, I'm very frustrated as a supporter at the way I feel we've been treated in the past couple of months, and the lack of communication. Issues like the refund that we talked about earlier as well. These should all have been much better handled. And I just get the feeling 3-4 years ago, they were getting better handled, So something's going on. It might be the pandemic. There's a lot of staff at Celtic Park not working. They're on furlough. So it must be a slightly unusual workplace as well at the moment. All of that could have had an impact. But again, in terms of the PR and communications, I don't understand why they've become so poor. But you're right. As football fans, we don't necessarily understand business. We're not all involved in business. This is a corporate body. He's got specific roles and responsibilities. And we just blame him for everything that goes wrong. And he gets a lot of credit from a lot of people. I think he gets more credit than he should for the success. But I think we can see it's hit and miss. He's the managers that came on, he gets the credit for. The players that we didn't get, he gets the blame for. So it's not easy to understand exactly what's been good and what's been bad under Peter Lawwell's reign. I have a regular criticism that he's a micromanager, that nothing goes on at the club. Not talking about the football side, other sides as well, Nothing goes on that he doesn't know about, that he's not got a kind of say over. And you think for the CEO, that should be a good thing. But again, it all depends how much time. It doesn't suggest a lot of trust in his managers if he's got that level of oversight. But again, unless you're there working, you don't really know the full story. And it's hard to bear judgment. The club's had this fantastic success. Now, is that down to money? Is that down to Brendan Rodgers? We've got 5, 6, 7. If Brendan hadn't been the manager, I don't know, perhaps not. So the club's definitely well run. I heard on Radio Scotland on Saturday, there was a panel question before the game, and there was a former Hearts player who's an agent. He was really talking Peter Lawwell up, saying Celtic were in a great shape, great club to deal with in terms of negotiations. He was a strong negotiator. And from his point of view as an agent, Peter Lawwell has served Celtic incredibly well, and that was good to hear. Again, very professional. But yeah, I think probably too long in one place. Things need freshened up. And that's why some erosion has set in different parts of the club as well. But he's a guy known for kindness too on a personal level. There was one time, I think going back about 3 years, we had a Celtic Graves Society event along the road at Dalbeth, and we had descendants from the player. I can't remember which player it was, unfortunately, because we've done this quite a few times. However, as sometimes happens, depending on the circumstances, the club offer the family a seat or two at the game in the big director's box, and somebody from the Graves Society is usually invited along to chaperone them, and I was that day, which was very, very good. After the game, back in the director's box, back in the lounge area, and Peter Lawwell came over to speak to the family, and it was a father and son who were through from the East Coast. So he took the time to do that. But then, and I wasn't expecting this, he then personally took the guys and us through along the corridor outside the first team dressing room for Brendan to come out. And Peter Lawwell personally introduced the family to Brendan and some of the first team players. And that blew their mind away. And that was just an example of kindness that he didn't need to do because he's a busy man. Because back in that lounge, there's all sorts of directors from other clubs, business contacts. But he took the time out to do that, you know. And I think moments of kindness like that deserve to be remembered from someone who is a Celtic fan, but deserved criticism for the way some things are done at the club, you know.
Yeah, that is a nice story. I've met Peter briefly a few times. The last time I was given a cheque to the foundation to Tony, and it was outside the boardroom at half time, and I'd gone down the stairs and Peter came along and he stopped, and it was just like, "Hello, how are you?" You know, little bit, and we would have attended. I didn't go. Michael went. We would have attended. They had this kind of fans meeting, not the View, ourselves, and I think really they wanted to get us all to pedal, you know, to toe the line, and you know, not to be one big happy family. And I don't know who else was at the meetings because I didn't attend, but I know that, you know, Michael was pulled aside after the meeting and was basically said, "But Peter, you can't speak to me like that in front of people." So we then had a channel to speak privately because obviously people were saying to us, "If you get in there, we'll ask me about, you know, this, that, and the other."
Yeah.
You know, and like we're nobodies, you know, we're just fans. So, but we had an opportunity. But funny enough, after a couple of them meetings and a couple of them outspoken meetings, they stopped the meetings, and unknown to ourselves, they started it again under another name, but they didn't invite us back. So, like, maybe we just didn't. Maybe we asked the wrong questions, but we thought they were the right questions. But we're still waiting for the answers for some of them. We never got them. But anyway, yeah, I didn't really have many dealings with Peter, and I would have. I always put my trust in people like the Celtic Trust, and we have a big supporters club here, and there's a couple of other big supporters clubs that wouldn't be affiliated to any associations. So, and we would have a rep within that would be, when there's a meeting on, he would attend on behalf of maybe 4 or 5 big supporters clubs, maybe a bit more, who would have, each club would have maybe over 100 books. So, you know, together they would have a bit of sway. So I always put my faith in them and wait for the outcome when we're looking for something. You know, at the end of the day, we want fairness, but we all fight our own corner for tickets or whatever it is. But
you've hit on one of my big gripes there, Andrew. And what you were explaining there, I know other people very similar experiences, and I think this is how Celtic have operated in the Peter Lawwell era, as far as the fans are concerned. So they would have meetings with certain groups of fans, so like the fanzines, you know, and the forums. And because the huddle board, they would talk openly about what was said in these meetings, but the club didn't want what was discussed at the meetings necessarily publicised. And there's sometimes good reasons for that, you know. So there's a degree of confidentiality needed. And then you've got the affiliation and the association. And I think maybe they moved away from fanzines because they then wanted to concentrate more on the online side. But it was all about nurturing elements of the support. And of course, supporters on the outside go, "Oh, you're in there, you're getting the coffee and the tea, and you're going to spout their line and all the rest of it." And a lot of fans just wouldn't go for that. You know, no, that's not going to happen. But what I've always wanted to see is, like, we need an actual supporters organisation that represents individuals. You know, it's not good enough. We've got supporters clubs, some supporters clubs split between 2 different bodies, and the communication from them to their members is very poor, always has been, you know. We don't have anything where those fans who are particularly interested in developments of the club have any kind of say. There's the shares things, and David, in his interview, talked about that in great detail and explained a lot of stuff that I didn't properly understand before as well. But not all supporters are shareholders, you know. But what we're missing at Celtic is an independent supporters organisation that people can join up and be represented. And I think Celtic under Peter Lawwell have been quite skillful in avoiding that from happening and not encouraging that. And that's a real missed opportunity. So now, I've been a member of the Celtic Trust previously and I've recently rejoined again. It's definitely an opportunity for the Trust to take on that role because we need it as a supporters group. We need a voice, and I don't think the Celtic support have that voice at the moment. And that's a real missed opportunity. And people at the club shouldn't be scared of the support, which is another thing that seems to have happened in the aftermath of the protests and the reluctance to engage with fans. This is just sowing more and more frustration. But what comes as a result of that, my concern is it's apathy. And then people, they just lose a wee bit of interest, And I can't help but get the feeling that there's some people involved in football clubs don't mind the idea of empty stadiums as long as the money's still coming in, so it's less hassle for them. So hopefully this is something that the new guy will address. But again, chief executives are corporate beings themselves, and if we're customers rather than supporters to them, that's not something they're ever going to engage with.
Yeah, the reason why I joined the Celtic Trust, I've been in a supporters club, an independent supporters club for over 20 years. And before that, I was in a different supporters club. And before that, I just travelled as a guest of a supporters club. But I like the fact that we weren't affiliated to anyone, because there's politics between the affiliation, the supporters association, the Irish association.
Yeah.
And I've got friends in all these groups, and I see people falling out over stuff or saying stuff on social media now, or slagging off a group, or saying something outside the ticket office or the pools office or something. And when I joined the trust, one of the reasons I joined was because it had members of all these groups.
Yeah.
So I firmly believe that, and the fact that I'm not a shareholder, but I became a shareholder by joining the Celtic Trust, because the money I paid in for a share or whatever. So that's what attracted me, because I now had a little say in the club, because my season book means nothing. Because if I give up my season book, there'll be someone to take it. Maybe not this season, but once the success comes back, and the fact, and it kills me to say it, but the fact that the new club come twice a year gets people very excited. And it's fantastic when you win. It is a fantastic occasion. It's a sporting occasion that neutrals want to go to. But for me, it's not just about Rangers. It's about Dundee on a cold Tuesday night. There's so much. But going back to the trust, and that's why we've had them on the podcast, because I do think it's a group that can unite us all. And I've seen people on social media, and I said it to a pal, and he says, "Oh, you mean the swamp?" Because he says if people are slagging off the trust, he says there's something wrong. He says it's a swamp. He says because it's there for everyone to see what it is. There's no seats in the director's box for the trust. If it was to span tomorrow, all the money that's there on the shares would go to charity. Like this is not, and there's no one within the trust, especially not Jeanette, who works tirelessly, pushing an ego. Egos don't bring you in. Don't bring you to defend the fans that were assaulted in Amsterdam. Ego wants to be seen, pictured in the boardroom. Ego wants to be seen with the players. Ego doesn't want to be doing the hard work of getting solicitors and being and going up to the whatever you call it over there, the Parliament, or going up to Edinburgh to defend to fight people who have been banned during the Offensive Behaviour Act. Anyone that goes on and slags these people off really should take a good look at themselves and go deeper into the swamp and fuck off. Excuse the language, because I'm shocked that someone could find fault with this group. Because for 20 years they've been doing nothing but defending the fans. So
you've got to remember, social media provides a platform to anybody to say anything they want, and some people just love an argument. So I've seen some people turning on the trust already and saying, you should be doing this and you should be putting that statement out. And I've nipped in a couple of times and said, email them. Social media is not the place for this. If you can join, and if you email them, somebody will take the time to respond. But social media is not an appropriate means of communication for everything, and fans need to realise that. But you'll always get an element of people. Some of these people really go to Celtic Park, but they've got a big profile on social media. So as you say, for those who get to the games regularly, who get away, get to Europe, then the people in the trust are well known because they're well-established Celtic supporters, and that's why they've got the good reputation they have amongst the ultra groups and the other fans group as well. Because they've given up their time to help a whole range of people, whole range of Celtic supporters, and they get the credit for that. I remember at the Johnny Thompson Memorial Tournament 5 or 6 years ago. I think it was the first time I'd ever met Eddie and Jeanette, although I knew them. but they just came along for the day. You know what I mean? From Glasgow, just to experience what that's like. And it's always a very good day out, and you get your chance to pay your respects at the end of it as well. But I thought that's just different gravy, isn't it? It's just people who've got Celtic running through their veins. Doesn't mean to say anybody's perfect or anybody shouldn't be subject to criticism if it's deserved, but that's the problem with social media. People just use it as a platform to abuse. But that's why you've got a mute button, and that's why you've got a block button. And people shouldn't be afraid to use it, because you wouldn't sit in a pub and listen to some of these idiots. So why would you sit, on your phone or sitting in your laptop listening to them? You just shut them down.
Yeah, you're dead right. Shut them down or shut them up. I think it maybe the younger days we might have confronted them in the pub, but as well Celtic dads there, we wouldn't be able for them. Now, listen, we mentioned Peter. Dominic McKay, new CEO coming in. Please tell me you know something about him, because I spent 5 hours. Two people I know in business sent me stuff. One sent me a lot of rugby stuff, and one that lives in New York sent me some great stuff on him, because he obviously reads business magazines or something. So I read through all of that, and then a few people sent me other bits and pieces. There was Matt McGlone posted up an interview with him on YouTube. Had a look at that. So I'm going 5 hours, and I still haven't enough to write a decent article on this bloke. And then I go online, and all these clickbait sites had stuff up 2 minutes later. What am I doing wrong? How can they research this guy in 2 minutes and have all this stuff up about him, from cut and paste and all the stuff, the same pages about him, because there wasn't that much about him. So that's my little dig at the clickbait sites. But I spent the whole morning trying to read up about him, and I know a lot about rugby now. I know about Glasgow rugby. I know about Edinburgh rugby. So I'll say it. I've said it once before to one of the boys, and I'll say it again. There's a huge difference between being involved in rugby in Scotland and being involved with Celtic Football Club. There's
absolutely. But there's a difference between being involved in running a single sporting institution, as opposed to an association. So I actually knew very little about Dominic McKay before the announcement was made. I don't think I'd ever really heard the name before. Interesting, he's not the CEO of Scottish Rugby. He's number 2 at Scottish Rugby. He's the man credited with being a good negotiator in the recent dealings with the Scottish government, because Scottish Rugby got a very good deal, financial deal through the pandemic. So he's been credited with the man who negotiated that. He's also credited with being responsible for getting Murrayfield sold out for a number of years because of aggressive, successful marketing that apparently he's overseen. I think his background is in PR. Now, that should be good, because I've done nothing but complain about the club's PR over recent months since I came on. So you'd like to think it doesn't always work out that way. But he's, coming in to manage quite a big organisation. But it's still a football club. It's still a Scottish football club. I think sometimes Celtic fans like to overemphasise how big we are. And I see that in the arguments about Peter Lawwell's salary. I certainly don't think that somebody who's managing a relatively small Scottish company, because Celtic don't have a huge number of employees, a reputation, our position in sport is obviously quite significant, but in terms of the organisation, we're not massive. But yet we have a chief executive pulling a basic annual salary, which to my mind is just eye-watering. 1.2 million Peter Lawwell's received basic salary for the last 4 or 5 years, double what he was on before. And in terms of Peter Lawwell's legacy, I don't see an improvement in every area of the club that would merit someone doubling their salary in the way that he did. I presume he got it off the back of supposedly not going to Arsenal, So Dermot Desmond, presumably being the power broker, decided we're keeping that guy and we're going to give him more money. And the remuneration committee that David spoke about, they're the people that will make that happen, who just happen to be fairly close working colleagues of Peter's. So lo and behold, he gets a 1.2 million salary from then on, and he gets a bonus, which appears to be related to Champions League qualification, which is how he got an extra 3.5 million 3 years ago. Now, to my mind, this is the kind of money that shouldn't be leaving a football club our size. He's basically getting a CEO salary, which CEOs down in English football don't get. So it'll be interesting to see. There's already been suggestions that he won't have quite the extensive role that Peter Lawwell has as chief executive, and that there might be other people who are at the club just now, or people brought in who'll take on other duties, which I think, the consensus is that would be a good thing, because Peter Lawwell's control is too wide-ranging. But he's never been a chief executive before, so it's very difficult to try and get a handle on how he'll be managing and running Celtic, In terms of his background, again, like you, Andrew, I couldn't find out an awful lot, because he's been at Scottish Rugby, I think, for the best part of a decade. So he's certainly spoken of warmly in rugby circles. I think we need somebody who can engage with the Scottish government. I think that's probably what led to Peter Lawwell's apology, because, again, being the organisation that we are, we need to have good links and we need to have good relationships with government. So I take some heart from that. But my concerns about engaging with the support, making sure that the support get representation, I'm not so sure any of those will be addressed, because it's another corporate appointment.
Yeah, as you said, he was the second in command. I think it's COO, Chief Operating Officer, I think is his title. He's 42 years old, which is very young, because not only are the players now younger than me, the chief executive's younger than me. So, times not on my side. And I'm told the first text I got was from a very reliable source from over your neck of the woods to tell me he is a Celtic man. So that's something.
He seems to be well known within the club. Again, from what I pick up with people saying on social media, people who've worked at the club previously or who still work at the club, he seems to be reasonably well known. So that's encouraging, somebody who is a bit of a supporter. I mean, there's no doubt Peter Lawwell's a supporter. Again, lots of criticism, some of it deserved, going his way. But that's the difference, when you're in charge of an organisation, to an extent, you've got to stop being a supporter because you've got different duties and responsibilities.
Yeah, funny you should say that. A few people know him. I'm jogging back my memory, and he may have been the guy that sat beside me on the way to Inverness. And maybe I shared a bag of cans with him before the police got on and took them off. My memory is a bit hazy, so maybe it was that guy.
If he doesn't come in and say Danny McGrain's got a job for life at Celtic, he should be all right.
He might come in and say that you have a job at life for Celtic. They could do it a good historian. But let's look. Like we've said it before, right? For a club the size of Celtic, the benchmark shouldn't be just staying one step ahead of those across the city. It should be progress in Europe. There's clubs with less money and facilities are now knocking us out of Europe. Yeah. And it's, that's the facts. And then it's we play in Scotland, Ajax play in Holland. And I got to the semi-finals of the Champions League. Now, I don't like them. I don't like the fans. I like the city, mind you. There's always plenty to do when the fans go there. But
as long as you don't bring your own drugs with you.
As long as you don't bring your own drugs with you to the drugs capital of Europe. But there you go. But they did, and they've proved. And there's always a team in there that, you always look at even the group stages and you're going, who are this team? They're from Belarus or they're from... So qualifications for the Champions League and that should be a benchmark the CEO's bonus should be based on. Definitely. Because Charlie Lord was on... Charlie lives in Philadelphia. Charlie was in the podcast for weeks, and Charlie had said, Peter Lawwell's bonus is there no matter what happens, because if we don't qualify, he'll sell a player. And then I don't know how true that is, but it's basically about the money that comes in and out of the club, and there's your bonus, like most companies. But football is different. Football has to be treated different than other PLCs, because we, as fans, customers, whatever they call us, Europe is where it's at. And if you're doing well in Europe, you're going to win your league. You're going to win your cups. Because if you're competing with better teams, there's definitely going to be a knock-on effect, especially if you have a strength and depth, which Celtic normally have. If they go away and play in Europe, they can rest up. They should be able to rest the player when they come back against 90% of the teams. But this season, no matter what team we're playing, you're nervous.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that this current Rangers team have benefited from doing well in Europe the last 2 years. You get a lot of encouragement, a lot of confidence from doing well against decent teams in the Europa League. And with us failing to get in the Champions League, I just always felt that even as fans, we weren't taking the Europa League all that seriously. That's our level, that's where we should be at least holding our own. And this is one of the disappointing things in terms of Peter Lawwell's legacy, is where we stand in European football today. It's really quite poor, after a number of disappointing seasons. There's been no significant improvement, even to take us back to the Martin O'Neill era in terms of Europe, So that's a concern that we haven't actually developed in that sense. And it's something that the support, I think, really miss out on, and there's a lot of the support judge the club and how well we do by what goes on in Europe. There's a lot. Compare it to Rangers, and that applies to all great rivalries as well, But yeah, that's what part of the frustration at the moment is, we don't even have decent performances in Europe to hark back to, or European competition to look forward to, and our league seasons just collapse from within. So that's worrying, and that for a new CEO, that's going to be a lot to take on, I would imagine.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be in a rebuilding process. But if Celtic was stuck for cash, I'd like them to come out and say, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to spend a couple of years building up our youth, bring our youth through, bring in a couple of players. Like, this is what we're going to do. Or if they have plenty of cash and they come out and say, look, we're going to buy X, Y, and Z, and we're going to go and have a go at Europe. You'd be happy that you now know the direction of the club. But at the moment, we don't even know who's going to be manager next week.
Yeah. And again, that's poor in terms of communications and keeping your fans on side. We don't know. We're being kept in the dark. And to me, it takes me back to really who's the force at Celtic, right? So with the passing of the years, we start to get glimpses of what really goes on at Celtic Park in terms of where the power lies. So after the managers leave, O'Neill, Strachan, Rodgers, stories start getting told by those individuals, about how they joined the club, who persuaded them. You sometimes get former chairmen talking to fans and telling stories as well. And for me, the thing that comes out crystal clear is that the key decisions are always made by Dermot Desmond. Dermot Desmond, no news to anybody, of course, but Dermot Desmond has the power. But it seems to me he doesn't have all the responsibility, because that's why I would have expected him to have stepped up by now to try and clear up this mess that's been created. And it seems to me a reaction to the protests that he's almost sticking it to the fans, by saying, no, you'll have to sit in this mess that's been created, and I'll decide in due course what's going to happen. He did say that he tried to persuade Peter Lawwell to stay. And I think that came as a bit of a surprise to a lot of the support, because 17 years is long enough, he's done well, time to go. So the fact that we could have had Peter Lawwell in for a few more years, if that's true, is a little bit concerning. And he's absolutely effusive in his praise of what Peter Lawwell's done. And I think no wonder, because Peter Lawwell's carried out his remit, he's not there very often, my impression. Somebody said to me on Twitter, he's not attended an AGM for more than 12 years. He only seems to be at the bigger games, the European games, and the cup finals and the semi-finals. And I would like, for somebody who's got all this power at Celtic, I would like and expect them to have a greater involvement than that. But again, when these interviews with people like David Lowe, there's a lot of comfort to be taken from the fact you've got a billionaire in your corner, especially in an unprecedented time like this. Fair enough, but billionaire or not, you would expect him to be stepping forward, and either him or through his CEO shown some leadership to at least give the support some guidance, some confidence that this is going to be sorted.
Tonight we're still in lockdown. We're still in a pandemic. The season's shit. So I'm going to give you the opportunity of a lifetime. I'm going to let you climb into my time machine, and I'm not going to let you go back once. I'm going to let you stop twice. I want you to go back somewhere from one of them fabulous fanzines you do, right, somewhere, and then on your way back, I want you to go to an actual game you've been at, or a trip you've been on now.
Okay. Thinking back through the fanzines then, Cliftonville 1984, there would have been an interesting game to attend. I wrote about that. It's a couple of years ago now. I would have loved to have been at Ajax, who you mentioned, when we beat them. In your George McCluskey interview, I noticed George was saying he'd been on the park with Cruyff. Dalglish was better. I thought, let's be fair, George, Cruyff was about 38. But fair point, Tommy Burns gets a lot of credit for his performances in those games at Ajax. So to be part of the away support that night in Amsterdam would have been sensational. And when I was writing about that, one of my pals said to me, "You know Joe Miller for Not the View, you know?" And I said, "I know Joe by name. I'd met Joe a couple of times at Hamburg, actually, as it happened down the years." He said, "You get in touch with Joe Miller about that Ajax game and ask him what happened to him that night," right? I said, "How come?" He says, "Because when we scored the winning goal, and Nicholas or McCluskey? Nicholas scored an amazing goal that night. I think it was maybe George McCluskey got the winning goal. It was Nicholas. Nicholas goes heading towards the corner, away from the goalpost towards the corner. He says, if you look closely into the darkness, he said, that's where the Celtic fans were, but we were stuck up the terracing. But there's a guy who's jumped the fence, right? And he's jumped the fence and he's running down the terracing in front of the terracing the Celtic fans were held in. And he's doing that, arms outstretched, running towards Nicholas. You know, he's still got another fence to go, which you can't go. And Nicholas is running towards him. He says, it's just this amazing sight. So get in touch and ask Joe Miller what the story was there. So I got in touch with Joe, and Joe says, I've got a scar down my side from where the spike in the railing went right through me that night. I said, but I just kept on going and jumped over. And that was Joe's memory, running down, arms outstretched, and Nicholas is running towards him still on the pitch. So that's just amazing, you know. And also, I think it was Tannadice that Celtic were at the weekend when they came back, and the fans were all singing, when it's spring again, we'll sing again, 2-1 in Amsterdam.
Oh, brilliant. And we've had Joe on the show twice. Joe was brilliant. Joe's last podcast, he spoke about, you know, the punk scene in the 70s in Glasgow and everything. And Joe is he's a breath of fresh air when you talk about Celtic, you know. But I think he's a bit down at the moment. The last text I got from him was he's just completely pissed off at what's going on at the moment. Right, so you've gone back in the time machine, but where are you going to go to somewhere you've actually been?
I thought about my first cup final in '85, which was just incredible. I wasn't meant to be there that day. I was 14, just chanced it. It was quite strange, and it was amazing. And the first game my kids were at in 2012, my boy was 2, my daughter was 4, and they watched Celtic come back, beat Aberdeen in the 5th minute of injury time with a Georgios Samaras overhead kick.
Oh,
10 minutes before this,
my wife's favourite player of all time.
The Plantain Provo. 10 minutes before this, my boy crying because it was freezing cold, crying and pleading, Dad, can we just go home because Celtic are getting beat and I'm freezing and I'm hungry. And my daughter, we were actually in the kind of just beyond the family section and the Aberdeen fans were over there. My daughter was amazed. Aberdeen. This was Aberdeen's first victory at Celtic Park in, I think, 12 years. So they were going crazy, but we kept coming back and coming back. Then we got it 3-3 about the 90th minute. And I'm saying to the wee man, just stay on, just hold on, I think we're going to win. And we did with that amazing overhead kick from Georgios. And we were jumping up and down, and the Aberdeen fans were absolutely devastated. But I remember that quite well, so I don't need to go back there. The game against Dundee, when the Centenary League was won in 1988, I'd love to go back to that day because I don't think I quite appreciated how significant and how historic an occasion it would prove to be. My pal Alex that I mentioned earlier, we went through in the supporters bus from Fife. As soon as we arrived off the bus, straight into the ground, probably about 2:00, just so we could get into the jungle, because we knew there was going to be a massive crowd because it was pay at the gate, which just seems mental when, you know, our 100th year, we're winning the league today and it's pay at the gate. It's crazy. So I'm saying to him, and I think I had to work hard and go, no, we need to go in as soon as we get there, and straight in and then up the back of the jungle. And even then it was already getting busy and the gates shut not too long after. So we were there. We had this brilliant. We didn't get in the jungle very often, I seem to remember, you know, but we were there, and the place just started filling up all around us, filling up. And then you're thinking, these people are coming over because huge terrace and can't hold them at both sides, you know. And that's what happened. There was so many people in the ground. They had to let them onto the park and then onto the track, and then they had to move them up there. So the place was absolutely bulging at the seams, and then the game hadn't even started, you know. So I would love to be able to go back in time just to see what it was like, the game in the jungle with that team, Aitken, Burns, all these absolute beloved legends, you know. Big Packy, who's a huge favourite of mine. Whenever you mention his name online, he gets stick from all sorts, which I just think is ridiculous. And I always say, statistically, one of the best goalies Celtic's ever had. Doesn't matter statistically, people say he couldn't even catch a cross body, save himself. Just an amazing day, you know. So I'd love to be able to go back. I'd love to see what the ground was like that day and try and remember it all, you know, because you forget the ways in and the different parts of the ground and the old floodlights and all the rest of it. So that would be amazing, just to be able to go back to be 1988 and to experience that. I think we did have a sense at the time that this was something pretty special, you know. And the centenary season, as Billy McNeil said, was just turning into a fairy tale because he'd come back. We were buying good players. We got a great striker in, but we already had a very good team there, you know, and Billy just fine-tuned it, and we were playing attacking football and we were winning games. We were never giving up, you know, the semi-final against Hearts, and we deserved, as a support, we deserved that day. And it was one of the greatest Celtic occasions ever. So just to be able to go back and just to kind of taste that again would be something special.
Oh, if only that time machine was working, huh? I give you a good one about Aberdeen and just in the area you were sitting in. I arrived into an Aberdeen game late. I think it might have been under Barnes or Venglas or Douglas. The league was we weren't competing for the league, I don't think, because I arrived in maybe at 3:10, and I'd had a good sub. You know, I'd been in the Gallagate, I'd done the tour of the Gallagate, I'd strolled up. I think I went into every pub on the way up. Some of them one of the pubs is definitely not there now. I think it's a chip shop now. But I went in. I remember there was an Aberdeen fan dressed as a chicken, and he got arrested. Right? And to my knowledge, the game was 2-2. I was back in beds that night. I was staying overnight, and I was talking to these boys from Cork, and we were arranging to go to Brazen Head to see Charlie and the boys or somebody, or the Era Og maybe. And I said, "Oh, it was a great day, but just a pity we didn't win, you know." My mum was looking at me, you know, say 2-2, you know. So I ended up going to the Brazen Head with these boys from Cork. I haven't ever seen them since, right? Because they probably thought this lunatic can't count. So the next morning, woke up in a hotel, hungover, no internet then, so got the papers for the flight home or the bus home, whatever I was on, and you know, straight to the Celtic match reports. You know, we'd won 3-2. So kids, if you're listening, don't drink before a game and go in, watch the 90 minutes. So that's one game I probably would go back and apologise to them Cork lads in my time machine. But it's been absolutely brilliant to chat, and I think this is going to be a two-parter because when I send this to Ronan to produce, he's going to have a heart attack. We've been talking for hours. And it's gone by in a flash. But before I let you go, I'm really looking forward to this Johnny Doyle book, the biography of Johnny Doyle, and I know how well you're going to research and write it. When can we expect it?
Well, hopefully it'll be out for Johnny's 70th birthday anniversary, which will be in April. April. This is also this will be the 40th anniversary of Johnny's death as well, in October. So I've been working on it for over a year. It's mostly written. There's a few things I want to still do and still find out. But it's been brilliant. You know, it's been fantastic learning about his playing career, Ayr United, and a very different time in Scottish football when Ayr United managed to stay in the First Division, then the Premier Division for a good 7 or 8 years straight. He's the last Ayr United player to be selected for Scotland for international honours, and he was the first one in 50 years as well. But the attraction here was, I remember, I've always heard stories about Johnny Doyle. There's a lot of fans who are just a wee bit older than me, probably in their mid-50s and their 60s now. He remains a favourite for a lot of people. And that's interesting, how somebody who was not a Celtic superstar, nobody's saying he was in the same category as Dalglish and Jinky and all these guys, but there's a connection that Johnny Doyle had with the Celtic support, which is quite unusual, in its strength and the fact it's survived. And that's one of the things I wanted to try and find out. How come, what was different about Johnny Doyle, even from, say, his great friend Tommy Burns, and in the interview that you had with George McCluskey as well, Andrew, I noticed that George was saying, I'm a Celtic diehard, Tommy Burns, Celtic diehard. Johnny Doyle was just different again. He was absolutely mad, and he came from a Celtic mad family. He's definitely got a Celtic mad daughter. Joanna's very well known. And it was through Joanna that I got asked to do the book. I'd previously done a memorial booklet on Johnny about 12, 13 years ago. So that's also part of the inspiration. But just a very interesting individual. The stories about him are legendary. So you're looking to see, well, are the legends true? What is it about Johnny? Why is it people still remember him? Why are they still telling stories about him? And I think it's because there's a definite personal link there, because people still remember, and people have been sending me photos of Johnny turning up at supporters' dues when he wasn't meant to be there, turning up at Player of the Year awards for youth clubs, staying for an hour or 2 hours, helping the women sweep up afterwards. Fans sent me photos. There's his maw, there's the brush, there's Johnny helping her. This is a guy who just loved to be in the company of other Celtic supporters, and he would go out of his way, and he gave up so much of his time to do that. He's also a guy who wanted to make a living from football. So as I said, he was part-time at Ayr, but he wanted to get full-time. He was desperate for Celtic to come into him, but it looked as though it wasn't going to happen for quite a long time. He was getting really frustrated at the treatment he was getting from defenders and referees and the lack of protection. And interestingly, that was something he was taking a stance on through the Players' Union. He was active in the Players' Union at the time, along with people like Alex Ferguson, who was a teammate of his at Ayr, who speaks about him as well. So being busy trying to gather in all these stories, his life story, the facts behind it as well. But fortunately, as well as Joanna and Jason, his children, his sister Anne-Marie's been a fantastic help, in piecing together the background. The family story in itself is quite interesting. And the kind of mining background that the family have, the Doyle family have in the Lanarkshire area also. So that there's lots to it, but there's just, he was difficult to sum up because so contrary, because people who knew him personally will tell you Johnny Doyle, a quiet guy, an inoffensive guy, real family guy, 2 young children, doted on them, wasn't a drinker, wasn't a big socializer, and married at a young age as well, so this wasn't somebody who had a history of hell-raising, partying or whatever, but his public demeanour was the complete opposite of that. He was mental, he was crazy. When Ayr United famously beat Rangers, a Rangers team that went on to win the treble, 75, I think. Ayr beat them 3-0 at Somerset Park, and it was a good Ayr team, and Johnny was one of the leaders in that Ayr team. He didn't score, but when that third goal went in, he ran all the way down the long side of the park in front of the Rangers fans with his crucifix out from under his jersey. It's just, he did the same when he scored against Rangers at Hampden 3 years later. And Davy Provan says Billy McNeill had given the players express instructions that day. I think it might have been a league game. It might have been when Rangers were playing at Hampden that season. Express instructions like the police have been in to the club. The players need to calm things down. We don't want any hassle today. So you're all under instructions. No bother. Johnny scores against Rangers, runs round the back of the goals in front of the Rangers end at Hampden, whips out his crucifix again. And Davy Provan's running after him going, "What are you doing? You were telling no to do anything daft, Absolutely crazy. So it's just trying to understand that, Eddie Toner tells a story from his granddad. So, as well as being groundsman, Eddie's granddad would be involved when the team go to Ibrox as well, part of the group, presumably helping the kit guys, helping the stuff get moved in and out from the coach and what have you. So Eddie says his granddad long told the story. They're getting in there, the Celtic buses arrived at the front of the main stand at Ibrox, so you get fans out there, the booing and all the rest of it, and in they come. And that's it, straight into the dressing room, no hanging around. Obviously, it's not the friendliest of places for Celtic people, straight in, except for the fact there's a commotion because on the stairs in the marble staircase, Johnny Doyle is standing belting out the Celtic song. And Eddie's granddad and others are sent back to drag Johnny Doyle off the marble staircase and into the dressing room. Just unbelievable. And this is it, he behaved like a fan would behave, which isn't really what you're looking for from your players necessarily. And I noticed as well that George, and there's loads of information I've got from George McCluskey because of all the interviews that George has given as well. But when he was speaking to you, Andrew, I noticed he said in the 4-2 game, he said it was almost as if Johnny's eyes were glazed over, He forgot he's there to do a job. And the idea of Alex McDonald, who he'd had a lot of run-ins with down the year, who he knew also through the Players' Union, Alex McDonald stealing time, Celtic are losing this crucial game, he's lying down there, he's feigning injury, so he puts his hand out, help to lift him up. McDonald pushes him away and rolls around again. So what does he do? He kicks him up the arse. He just does. And as you were asking, and George McCluskey was saying as well, he was devastated. He was crying his eyes out. He thought his Celtic career was over because he lost us that league. And then amazingly, his teammates managed to pull it out the fire and score 4 goals. And then becomes legend. And one of the things I found was both John Clark and Billy McNeill saying years later that the players would wind Johnny Doyle up by singing the old song, 10 men won the league. And Billy McNeill and John Clark were quite happy to let this go because he deserved it, But he took it on the chin.
It's, you've obviously done some serious research, and you've put a year of your life into it, and I hope that when it comes out that it sells well and people read it, because I know the effort that goes in. People like yourself put into these books, and they're not like a cashing in for Christmas book. These are a labour of love, and we need to get behind the independent authors and publishers, and because we have a great scene going, and there'll always be. And I suppose now with social media and so much content out there, some of the quality content gets lost. You could launch a book at the same time as a player, and the player's book would be, wouldn't be quite up to standard as the one that maybe you would write, or Brendan or David Potter or whatever. But the publicity of this book, and if the club are backing it, it gets lost. So hopefully this will do really well, and let us know. Keep us posted on it, and we'll keep pushing it out when the book comes out, because I for one can't wait to read it, because it's a player that, again, like, I don't know that much about before my time. You hear about him in song, which not every player is remembered in song. And I did see some stuff on social media from, is his daughter named Joanna,
yeah.
I did see some stuff on her. So best of luck with it. But most of all, thanks very much for coming on for a chat. As I said, it could be a 2-parter because there's so much. We've covered so much in it. It was great to talk about the current woes of the team and that, but more importantly, it was great to get into your Celtic soul and let you into my time machine.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Paul, absolute pleasure. And best of luck with the book. Best of luck with the fanzine. I'll put all the details of the Shamrock in the podcast description, folks. So make sure you check out Paul's range of books, fanzines, Celtic Graves, and Walfrid Walking Tour. Because this man is not even in the lockdown. He's writing books. Some man. Paul, thanks a million. Hail, hail.
Thank you, Andrew. All the best, mate. Hail, hail.
Well, folks, I think you'll all agree that was well worth keeping the tape running and having a second part with Paul. I cannot wait to read the Johnny Doyle book he's working on. He's put some hours into it and he's done some research. So, folks, when it comes out, make sure you get a copy, because this is going to be one of the best books of the year. Issue 113 of the fanzine is now on sale, and all pre-ordered copies and subscription copies have been sent out in the post. So you should have it by the time you listen to this. Maybe if you're in Ireland, it might take a little day or two longer to get to the UK. With Brexit now has slowed the post down, unfortunately. As always, I'd like to thank my producer Ronan McQuillan for his excellent work. And folks, as I said earlier, if you like what we're doing with the podcast, the fanzine and the website, and you would like to support us, you can become a member, subscribe, buy or donate for the price of a pint. Don't forget to visit the website for all our articles and news updated every day. And don't forget to download the app, that's free. So click into it on Apple or Google Play and you can download Celtic Fanzine app. All episodes of the podcast are available on all platforms. Hit the subscribe and follow button so you'll never miss an episode, and you can always leave a 5-star review. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, and all the details are in the podcast description. We're looking for a few sponsors, so if you're Celtic-minded businessman with a Celtic-minded business and you would like to support us, or if you're a Celtic supporters club and you would like to support us, or an individual member, you're more than welcome to support the podcast. Contact us at info@celticfanzine.com or through the website, or message us on social media. Folks, if you're enjoying the conversations with all our guests, don't forget, spread the word, and if you've missed some of our episodes, they're all available on the platform, or you can also get them on celticfanzine.com or on the app. So once again, folks, thanks for listening. St Johnson up at noon on Sunday, another away weekend stuck on the sofa. But as I said last week, get out into that fresh air, get out and about, keep the head right, and if you're having any problems, don't bottle them up. Speak to someone, because there's always someone there to listen. Now, we've been lending our support to musicians and artists over the last number of podcasts, and last week we had the Blarney Pilgrims on, and what a reaction we had to them. There was some great chat on the WhatsApp group and some great messages coming through on the social media platforms about reliving gigs in Dublin, Glasgow, Drogheda and Duleek. They were just such a brilliant band, and I'm hearing they have another album coming out, and I'm also hearing that there might be the odd live gig coming up. Hopefully there will be, because it would be great to go and see the Blarneys again, and I suppose get together with the old crew when all this bloody lockdown is over. So folks, we're going to play out another Blarney's Pilgrim song today from the Granda Was a Celtic Man album, 200 Miles From Home. I suppose, as Mark Burke from Nave Park said to me, the joy and misery of travelling on a coach trip to see Celtic. So folks, that's all for this episode. Stay tuned, stay safe, and as always, keep the faith.
The party's over, the bus is quiet now. The duty free's no longer going round. The boys down the back have stopped their singing. They're trying to get their heads down. The beer's too warm for drinking, and the coffee, well, it's way too cold. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're still 200 miles from home. It seems like we've been on the road forever. The people we've met and the stories we could tell. But it's been less than 48 hours since we bade Govan Hill a fond farewell. But didn't we have the good time? There's nothing like going with the sons on the road. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're still 200 miles from home. Ask the driver, would he please turn the tape to the other side? And Christy Moore singing John of Dreams will be our lullaby. Tired and weary, and I've spent all the money for my rent. I've already put my name down for the next trip. I wouldn't miss it for the earth. But right now all I want is my own bed. As for work in the morning, well, I don't think I'll be going. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're still 200 miles from home. Ask the driver, would he please turn the tape to the other side? And Christy Moore singing John of Dreams can be a lullaby.